All right, we're talking about the wars with the Persians, and after the initial attack um, of Athens, Themistocles, one of the leaders of Athens, wants to build triremes. And remember, I don't know if we've discussed the triremes. I think we have, but if we haven't, we will right now. Triremes are long vessels, ships. They get the name tri from three because they have three banks of oars. All right, sort of in elevation, so top, middle, and bottom. The triremes were quite expensive to build, and they had a large crew of roughly 170 people. So really, for them to be effective, you would have to row in harmony, right? You would have to be in rhythm, because remember, for the Greek navy, the weapon is the ship. Okay? We think about, them having a torpedo, or they have guns, or whatever. They fire things, projectiles at the other ships. That's not what the ancient Greeks did. They didn't have any of that. The ship itself was the weapon. It was the torpedo, so to speak. These ships were long, they were narrow, and the bow of the ship was heavily, made heavy duty wood, and then normally was sheathed in metal. So that they would have to get up to, first they would have to go in the right direction and get up to a fast speed, and then ram broadside into the enemy ship. That was basically the goal. And if you could do that, perhaps you could punch a hole in their ship and they would take on water. Then what of course you're going to need to do is back away so you don't get taken down, have your ship stuck in their ship, and that's not going to be good for you. So being able to maneuver these ships, turn them quickly, get them up to speed, ramming speed, all this would take a lot of practice. And so it's hard to go out and to get 170 guys and stick them in there and say, okay, let's go out to battle. It's not good. You got to train them as well. So he wants to do this, but building these ships was quite expensive, as you need a lot of wood and need the right kind of wood. And then, of course, you've got to put it all together in the right way. Well, they found silver mines in their territory in 483, and basically he wanted to invest that money in building of triremes. So he convinces Athens to bank away the money from the silver in ships. And as you probably know, we've mentioned, and in your reading, you know that the navy of Athens was their strongest aspect of their military and their strongest weapon. These ships were built just in time for the next attack, so we need to keep that in mind. The navy of Athens was really their saving asset, fighting the Persians, and it's really the thing that's going to keep them in the game when they fight the Spartans later on as well. Okay. Themistocles, need to remember him. We see here, I think I showed you this last time, just how large the Persian Empire is. So I won't say more about it, but just notice it goes all the way from what would be Afghanistan today, all the way past Egypt to Libya, and then all the way up into, Georgia and Armenia and so forth, and then all the way across to Greece. So Greece, as you can see, is really pretty small compared to the Persian Empire. All right, let's move on from that. Now, we were at Xerxes, right? Is this where we left off last time? So we did that one already. So I won't go through that. But according to Herodotus, this might have been our last slide last time, was it? Yeah, I think it was. They assemble a huge army. And of course, a lot of people are critical of Herodotus and his numbers. 2 million. There's never been any military force known that's been 2 million in the modern times. And so people question this number, and I think it is exaggerated. But it is showing us that when they tried to estimate the numbers, I think they're saying it goes on and on and on. We can't, this is the biggest army we have ever seen. How many were in it? I don't know, but a lot. Because Xerxes wanted to overwhelm, he had sort of underestimated the Athenians, or the Persians had, and so he wants to overwhelm them and just wipe them out and be done with this because, I think in his thinking, this is such a small territory, it's not, but now it's become a thing because they have stood up to the Persians. And the Persians didn't want that because when the word gets out that some small, relatively small nation has stood up to the Persians and withstood their army, that's going to encourage others in the outlying areas of the Persian Empire to perhaps do likewise. Okay? So I think that's why he really tries to do that. Thermopylae. The Battle of Thermopylae is, of course, quite famous. And you probably know it from the movie The 300, right? Which is, I think, an interesting film. Historically, however, I suppose what I've had to do over the years, because mostly the only questions, I won't say the only questions, but most questions I get about anything historical comes from films. Okay, somebody will see a film. I remember one time I was teaching a course on ancient Egypt. I don't know if I told you this or not. I was teaching a course on ancient Egypt, and I was talking about the afterlife, how they make mummies, and how they would and so forth. And I mentioned that the dung beetle was represented as a scarab. Okay, because it's a beetle, so the scarab shape becomes a piece of art that's carved out of usually various stones. They carve it out of a stone, and it would be placed with a mummy, buried with them, and it's sort of the idea of resurrection of the afterlife. Because the dung beetle would actually it gets its name because it would take dung, roll it across the ground. It would insert eggs into the dung and then bury it in the ground, and then from the dung would spring forth new dung beetles. Okay, so the Egyptians observed this, and then they equated the rolling of the dung ball with the sun rolling through the sky, which was their idea, and that from it came new life. All right, so I was talking about that kind of thing, and so then this guy says, so is that when they put those in there, is that when they eat up the body? And I said, what? I said, well, when they put those beetles in with the mummy, then that's what eats up the body. I had no idea what he was talking about. But one of the things I've decided I need to do is to try to watch films that are supposedly historical so that I know what people are asking me. And what I found out was in the movie The Mummy, they have like all these little army of beetles that like swarm and go in and put a guy in a coffin, and then it goes in there and it eats them up and they become a mummy, I guess, or something like that. Anyway, so that's what I'm saying. So now with the 300, I went to see it, and I was really looking forward to it because I thought this is going to be great because this is such a great story. I mean, really, it's a great battle and it's a great story, and there's going to be a lot of fighting, a lot of good stuff. Everybody will like it. And so then I get in there, and they've really changed it, right? I mean, they put in sort of like, I don't know, it's partially animated. I don't know what they've done. CGI, I don't know what they're doing with the guys, but they don't look very realistic, and none of the stuff, like they make like huge chasm, I don't know, the geography wasn't right, and nothing about it was right. And so then students would ask me about it. So I would say, well, there were Persians and there were Greeks, and they did fight at Thermopylae. and all the Greeks died. And so that part's right. Some of the other stuff is right. So what I finally have decided to try to make peace with all the historical films is that I see them as not a way to teach anybody any history, but maybe as a way to get somebody interested enough that they might want to learn the history. Although a lot of bad history gets out there because of them. Does that make any sense? By the way, speaking of bad history, next fall I'll be teaching a class. That's a segue. It's called History Through Popular Culture, and not the kind that's inside of you, the punctuation kind, film and literature. Okay, so assuming things go well on Tuesday, but even if they don't, I'm still teaching the class. It'll just be listed like all the other ones have been listed, I guess, as a, what are they called? Special topic. But anyway, hopefully it'll have a regular number. And we will look at a lot of films. All right. So the 300 you've probably seen. You know that Thermopylae means the hot gates. Now, let's say, for example, in this room, there's only one door in here that I can see. That's over there to my right. And let's say we don't have too many in here. Our ranks are pretty thin today, as they seem to always be these days. So what do we got? 3, 6. We got 9 people. Let's say there's 900 people out there in the hallway that wants to get in here, or outside the building. They want to get to us specifically. All right? The thing that's going to help us is the fact that they're going to get jammed up and crowded. To get 900 people in here to get us is going to be hard. Even if there's 100 out there in the hallway, they're all going to have to come through that door. We know where they're coming, right? And, you know, you might be able to get 2 guys through that door at once, maybe. Not easily. Certainly probably not 3. So that means we've really only got to fight 2 or 3 people at a time. And there's 9 of us, you see. So that's, the odds are now, we think, well, now we're going to get tired and they're going to keep coming because there's hundreds of them. But we don't have, now that's the idea that the Greeks have to use, and what they do use, to fight against the Persians. They are outnumbered. Regardless of what you think of Herodotus' numbers, they are greatly outnumbered. So they strategically pick a spot where they know the Persians are going to have to come through, and they're going to have to come through a place that's very narrow, much like our door here. This is a place where there are mountains. So if we're looking north, if we're the Greeks and we're looking north and the Persians are coming at us, to our left would be hills and mountains. They're difficult to scale. To our right is the ocean, and the beach is pretty narrow. Okay? So that means that the Persians are going to have to come at us head on, and it's going to limit their numbers, even if they have hundreds of thousands of troops. We're only going to have to fight maybe 40 or 50 of them at a time, you know, because that's probably all that's going to fit across there. All right? So that's the idea. Now, the Spartans are asked, if the Athenians know that the Persians, people know, I mean, if you're moving thousands of people down to attack you, it's pretty easy to figure out they're coming. And so they go and ask for help. They ask the Spartans to come and help. They ask other Greek cities to come and help. They're saying, look, the Greeks had always been independent, but they say, look, this is a massive army. These guys, if they take us over, they're going to take over everybody. They won't stop with us. We need your help. Spartans weren't that interested, to be quite honest with you. In fact, they said, well, you know, we'd like to come help you, but right now, you know, we've got this festival, I think it was of the new moon, and when that's over, we'll definitely be up there to help you. When's that going to be over? Well, 2-3 weeks. We'll head your way. Well, you know, that's not. But, of course, there was one who volunteered. And then he asked his men if they would volunteer. And so 300 of them, Leonidas and 300 of the Spartans, volunteer to go, even though the rest are not going to go. All right, so that's in the movie, sort of. and they head that way. Now, what you might think from watching the movie, I don't know what you thought because it's hard to make out what's going on in the movie, but what you might think is that it was only the Spartans fighting the Persians. That's not correct. That's not correct. There was a whole host of Greeks that were fighting the Spartans from various cities. Obviously, the Spartans were the best trained because they trained almost since birth to fight. But there were warriors there from other cities. Now, all of them knew that they would eventually be defeated. You know, if you're going up against, like, if we got 900 people coming out, we can hold this room for a while, but eventually, you know, some of us are going to get hurt, die, some we're going to get tired, and they're just going to keep coming, right? So, okay. So what happens then is they begin to hold them, and when the Persians send their troops in, Xerxes sees this, he thinks kind of a puny, I'll call it puny army, right? Certainly in numbers. And so he thinks this will be easily taken. So he sends in just regular troops. The regular troops are defeated. They're held back. This makes him kind of angry. So he decides to send in his elite troops called the Immortals to fight. These are the best that the Persians had. And they're called the Immortals not because you could not kill them, you could, but they were trained in such that as soon as one man would fall, the other would just come right in his place. So that it always appeared that even though I'm killing these guys, their numbers do not diminish. Okay, that's sort of the idea. Now, in the film, as I really have tried not to watch it too many times, but in the film, you know, they have them like with rhinos, and then they have the Immortals looking like they're some sort of like Lord of the Rings kind of, what do they call those things? Not the Ewoks, but the whatever they are. What's that? The orcs, yeah, that's what they kind of look like. That's what they kind of look like the orcs and all that sort of. In other words, they don't look like real people. They look like they're something else, which again is not true. They didn't have rhinos, to my knowledge. So anyway, now of course, these are the Immortals, and he wants to make them look different. I know it all came from some kind of comic book, graphic novel thing. So he's trying to get people appeal to it. So okay, but anyway. So they go in and fight, and now they are not really making the progress. They're really not winning. The Greeks are still holding their own. So what changes it? What changes it is a traitor. There was a local, maybe a shepherd, who really wasn't all that, he didn't like the Athenians, and he didn't really like what was going on, and so he thought he could make some money. At least that was one interpretation, that he went to him to be bribed. And he said, if I could show you a way around this pass, what would that be worth to you? I said, sure, we'll give you whatever. We got plenty of dough, right? And so they do. And so basically he takes them, it's a difficult route, but they can take with a whole line of men. They go up around the mountains, they do a mountain pass, and then they come around behind. So that now the Greeks are going to have to fight the Persians both in front. You're like somebody showing a back door to this room and say, they're holding you at this door. What if I could show you a back door that you don't know about? Well, now we're going to have to split our efforts and try to hold off two places, okay? Now, once it becomes apparent that that's going to happen, then the Spartans will say to the other Greeks, leave, go to your cities, go to defend them because the Persians are going to be coming. We will stay and hold them as long as we can. And of course, all 300 of them die. But they take out a lot of guys in the process. All right? So, pretty interesting story. And the other thing you need to remember, that this battle of Thermopylae slows the Persian army down enough that, in fact, the city of Athens is completely evacuated. The people leave. They take out a lot of their, nice possessions with them, so that by the time the Persians get to Athens, there's nobody to kill. There's really very little to rob. It's just empty buildings. And they're so angry that they torch the city. They burn it to the ground. All right? Now, the Persian military obviously is quite formidable. They're land forces. Their navy is not. In fact, they have a kind of mercenary navy. If you read Herodotus, you'll see that even their whole army is coming from all over the Persian Empire. He goes through and gives a list of, how many units came from here and how many came from here and so forth, all different parts. So it's a nice way to sort of figure out all the different areas that the Persians controlled and how they had it organized by what they were called satrapies or provinces. And each one was required to send troops. And so they would sort of keep them in kind of their ethnic, linguistic, makes sense. They speak different language. You don't want to mix them all up. You won't be able to know what's going on. Well, anyway, they are going to have to supply themselves by water. And by supplies, I mean mostly food, maybe more weapons and things. Other goods that they're going to need, they have them in boats, and they are sailing down along the coast, resupplying from time to time the military. That way the military doesn't have to carry, the foot soldiers don't have to carry all of the goods. That makes sense, right? Into battle. So you have like huge backpacks or something, and everybody's got their own backpack, and then when they get to battle, they got to take off their backpack and fight, and then pick it back up. So this way, it's a way to sort of let them move quicker on land. So the Greeks then know that the Persians have this fleet that's bringing down goods and sort of defending them, from a naval attack, and so they come up with a similar plan. Since the Persians had a lot of ships, the Greeks picked a spot. I think I have a map later, but it's down near Athens. There is a place from the coast where there's an island out off of the coast. All right, so imagine this. The island's pretty good size. If the ships are going to come towards the harbor of Athens, they're going to have to go between the island and the coast. And so that's what they do. And this bay is called the Bay of Salamis. And so this is pivotal because this really is kind of the turning point of the war. As the Persian ships come through, I'm not very good at it. I'll try to draw something just because it's here. There's a marker here. Right? So let's say here's the coastline, and here is the island. If they're going to reach Athens, they need to come this way. So as they come this way, the Greeks are waiting for them. Yeah, you got a question? Oh, you're just stretching.
No,
yeah.
This is all within the Peloponnesian
War. No. This is the Persian War. We're talking about, there's two different wars. First, the Persian War. Persian War is first. Starts with Ionia. All right, western coast of Turkey, where the Persians come and take it over, and the Athenians insert themselves into that. And now that gets the Persians upset. They send one wave in. That's the Battle of Marathon, where they sent a small group in. And now they're sending a much bigger group. Okay, and when this battle is over, just to give you the sort of outline. Athens, spoiler alert, is going to hold off the Persians, but the fear that the Persians are going to come back is going to drive the Athenians to create an empire, a league, the Delian League, and this Delian League will be controlled by Athens. And basically, it's a coalition of Greek cities that say, okay, we're going to team up because we never know when the Persians might come back. Okay? Now, other cities don't like that, and it becomes clear that while you can join the league, you can't leave the league. So it's really Athens has created their own empire. So, now we're under the thumb of the Athenians rather than, say, the Persians, but we're not independent. So others down on the Peloponnesus will create their own league to fight against the Athenian league, the Delian league, and that is the Peloponnesian War. So the two wars are related, but one is a civil war of Greek cities. The other is a war against an outside force, the Persians. That's the first war. Well, the ships come in like this, and here's the Bay of Salamis, and there's an island. So that when the ships come in, all of these Persian ships are entering. The Greek ships are waiting for them here. Because as they're coming in this way, they know they have to sail like this. There's not that much area here. And the Greek ships can be waiting and attack. In fact, on some occasions, the Greeks used an interesting formation. They put their ships in a circular pattern like this, almost like a star, where the ship could dart out to attack and then retreat back. Dart out and attack, retreat back. So as the Persian ships go by, whatever way the Persian ships try to come to them, they'll be more vulnerable. This was one of their tactics. At any rate, this Bay of Salamis, a naval battle, was a rousing victory for the Athenians. They sunk a lot of Persian ships. A lot of supplies went down in it. In fact, according to Herodotus, Xerxes himself is up on a high spot up here, watching the ships coming way up high. He sees the naval battle. He sees what's happening, and he decides to head back to Persia. He turns it over to his generals to finish. He knows it's not going well, in other words, and he wants to make sure he's back home before any news of this gets out, to make sure he can put down any trouble he might run into. All right? So this is really the turning point of the war. The war itself will not end until about a year later, or several months later, in 479. There is the Battle of Plataea. Plataea is to the north and west of Athens, out on a plain, and this will be a land battle where, in fact, the Greeks will defeat the Persians in a land battle, and then the Persians leave. Okay? So, I think the 300 film had a sequel, which I did not watch. Anybody know what I'm talking about? I don't know what the title of it was. What was it called?
I think it was 600.
What's that? The 600? No, I don't know. 300 Part 2? Well, I don't know. But they did make a sequel, which I have yet to watch. But it focuses more on this battle, the naval part.
It's 300 and then there's 300
Rise the Vampire.
Rise of an Empire.
Oh, Rise of an Empire. Okay, good. I thought it was like Rise of the Vampire. I said, wow, it really did change the story. They're all vampires and zombies. That's what I'm going to write, a film that just has vampires and zombies in it. And, of course, humans that get killed.
Wouldn't that be every one of them movie?
Well, it's like every movie being made now is either superheroes or vampires or some kind of weird fantasy people or zombies. When the zombies come, and we know they will.
They're already here.
Well, yes. I hope they're the slow ones. Because if they're the Brad Pitt fast ones, we got no chance. You've seen the Brad Pitt fast ones. I mean, they're like soaring. They go like 30 miles an hour. There's no way I'm outrunning one of those zombies. And they like come in herds. If they're the slow ones, like the Walking Dead ones, at least I might survive for a few days. Until I fall down and they all get me. Anyway. Themistocles, again. This is another story that we find. He sends a servant to the Persians to pretend, the servant pretends that he's a traitor. And he says that the Greeks are in disarray, and if the Persian fleet could move quickly, they could defeat them. This is part of the way they got the Persian fleet to move in all at once, you see. I think the military would call this disinformation. The rest of us just call it lying. Just disinformation. When the government gives you information that's disinformation, it's not lying, it's disinformation. Fake, huge. It's very huge. Yeah, fake news. Really big fake news. This was fake news. The fake news was this, that the Greeks are in disarray, and if they sent in the Persian fleet now, they could quickly defeat them. So at daybreak, the Persian fleet had moved in so far, it moved into this area between the island and the shore, that they were all kind of jammed up in there. And by the time they saw what was happening with the Greek ships, well, they were trapped. The Greeks, of course, were not in disarray. That was disinformation. That was fake news. And they had trapped the Persians. And without a fleet, then, of course, the Persians' army was crippled because they didn't have the supply lines that they needed, food and things like that. All right? So that's just a little, and we get all this stuff from Herodotus. I've been to places, conferences and things where they really, they really seem to enjoy ripping Herodotus apart. Okay, I don't know, but he's really our only source. So that, they go in and read it and they say, well, this has to be wrong, this is wrong. And they can find a few things they find wrong. Okay, I think Herodotus does exaggerate some numbers. I think maybe he made some mistakes. But if we didn't have Herodotus, we really wouldn't know much of anything about the Persian War, to be quite honest with you. Well, anyway, there's my defense of Herodotus. Since we have a Herodotus Society, I feel compelled to fight for his right to party. No, that's a song. That's an old song. You don't know that song, do you?
The Beastie Boys.
Wow. Yeah. How do you know that? Those guys have been like dead for a long time.
Dead.
Yeah. Anyway, I guess they were partying too much. Anyway, here is a map that shows us where these things that we've just mentioned, the stuff with the Persians, took place. See, for example, here's the Battle of Marathon, right? Which is about 26 miles from Athens. All right, so that's in 490. And then way up here is the Battle of Thermopylae. That was in 480. Okay, and then they came down along this way. All right. So then after they defeat the Spartans there, they march down along the coast, and they're coming around this way. Now you see the island here? See how the island is close to the shore? Whoa, moved it, sorry. Right there, that's where the Battle of Salamis takes place. Okay? And of course, that is a Greek victory. So, Marathon, Greek victory. Thermopylae, Persian victory, ultimately. Salamis, Greek victory on water. And then the Battle of Plataea out here, 479. This is the last major battle, and this is a Greek victory on land. Okay, so I hope that gives you the geography of it. We've been talking about it. Here is the geography of it. Where are we at? We got about 5 minutes. This will then lead to a peace agreement, I would say a tense peace agreement between the Persians and the Greeks. Okay? It's called the Peace of Calais in 449 at the end of the Persian War. The Peace of Calais. Basically, this idea here is kind of a truce or a stalemate, right? The Persians say, okay, we will stay out of Greece and your islands and stuff, but the Greeks are to stay out of Persian territory, like Ionia, helping out the Athenians, sending ships to help rebellious Persians, or people under Persian control. And so that agreement is drawn up in 449, and that ends the Persian Wars. And by the way, well, the Persians never come back. Now, of course, the Greeks don't know that. The Greeks fear they'll come back, and that fear then drives them to create a lot of military things. So many people, who've wanted to try to make this applicable to our day, but of course not our day anymore because the Cold War is long gone. But they would relate it to the Cold War period, where you have a tense peace between the Soviet Union and the United States, right? And then the buildup of arms and the preparation for a war that never really happened. We never did end up fighting the Soviet Union. That's why it's a Cold War. We fought indirectly and that sort of thing. So that's the Peace of Calais. How much time do we have? 3 minutes. Well, let me introduce anyway the Delian League. The Delian League then is formed. This is a group of Greek cities, city-states, that decide they need to come together because they believe the Persians were coming back. And we have to be ready because the idea was, yes, we defeated the Persians, but we were kind of lucky because we were way outnumbered, right? And if the Persians are going to learn from that, and next time we're not going to be able to pull some of the tricks we pulled on them. If they come back with a massive army like they had, we're all going to be in trouble. And so they decide if we team up, we will have a formidable force to be able to meet them right away and to try to curtail it and perhaps be a deterrent where they think, well, these guys are more prepared now, so we won't even come. So anyway, that's what happens. It gets the name Delian League because it is officially centered on the island of Delos. The island of Delos is part of a group of islands that sort of form a circle out in the Aegean. The Greeks thought they were special religious islands, especially Delos has a lot of temples on it and had very few people living on it. But it was chosen because it was sort of a religious center, right? And so they thought it'd be sort of like if the European nations, let's say in the 1800s, picked the Vatican as is the center because the Vatican was religious, and we'll kind of keep the money there and stuff so that none of us can use it against each other. All right, but this was, make no mistake, it's controlled by Athens, and anybody who had any doubts of that found out that even though at first it was voluntary, later on it's controlled by the Athenians for sure. And for example, you had to pay an annual fee to be a part of this. And when one island did not send their money in, the Athenians sent warships and said, we think you forgot to pay. So it becomes clear that you can, join, but you can't really leave. And they drop all the pretense in 454 BC when they move the treasury of the Delian League to Athens for safekeeping. So it's not safe out there on that island. Let's move it here to Athens where we can keep an eye on it right here in the center. So that's the Delian League. So remember, we're talking about this classical period, right? Persian threat, Persian war, Persians forced out. Now a league that forms. It will really create an Athenian empire. And now what we're going to see later is a rising up of the Peloponnesian states that will come to see this as a big threat, more of a threat than the Persians, and they'll begin to fight them. That'll be a civil war. That's the Peloponnesian War. Well, I hope you have a good weekend, and remember,